Welcome back to part 2 of The Alchemist. In the first part, we followed Santiago, the young shepherd, as he discovered his dream and set out on a journey across the desert. Now, in part 2, his path leads him deeper into mystery, love, and the wisdom of the alchemist, bringing him closer than ever to his true treasure. Let's begin. The boy's name was Santiago. As the last light of day faded, he guided his flock of sheep toward the ruins of an abandoned church. Its roof had long since collapsed, and in the middle of the old sacristy, a giant sycamore tree now grew, its branches stretching toward the sky. It was not the first time he had sought shelter there, and tonight, once again, it would be his home. Carefully, Santiago led his sheep through the crumbling gate, laying planks of wood across the entrance so none would wander in the night. Wolves did not roam this part of Spain, but he had once lost a sheep after nightfall and spent a whole day searching for it. He would not take such chances again. Satisfied that his flock was safe, Santiago spread his jacket across the dusty floor and lay down, resting his head on a book he had just finished reading. With a tired smile, he thought to himself that thicker books were better, they lasted longer and made softer pillows. When the night passed and dawn was still far away, Santiago opened his eyes. Through the gaps of the broken roof, countless stars sparkled above him. He wanted to sleep more, but a familiar dream had awakened him, the same dream he had been having for more than a week. Always the same, always unfinished. With a sigh, he rose, picked up his shepherd's crook, and began waking his sheep. He noticed something curious. When he stirred, the flock stirred too, as though some unseen bond tied their lives together. For 2 years he had led them across the Andalusian countryside, searching for water and pasture. They had become part of him, and he part of them. Sometimes he wondered if he followed their rhythm, or if they followed his. He called them by name, gently nudging those who were slower to rise. Santiago often believed his sheep understood him. On long days, he read passages from his books to them or spoke about the joys and sorrows of being a wandering shepherd. Lately, however, his words had been about only one thing, a girl. A year earlier, Santiago had taken his flock to a village where a merchant lived. The man was cautious and demanded that the sheep be sheared in his presence. While Santiago waited outside the shop, book in hand, a voice surprised him. "I didn't know shepherds could read," said a young woman with long black hair and dark eyes that carried the mystery of Moorish ancestry. She was the merchant's daughter. For 2 hours they spoke. She told him of her simple life in the village, and Santiago told her stories of the wide countryside, of places he had visited, and people he had met. It was different from speaking to his sheep. Here was someone who listened with wonder. For the first time, he felt a desire he had never known before, the wish to stay in one place forever. But when her father returned, Santiago was paid for his wool and told to return the following year. Now that year had passed, and in 4 short days Santiago would see her again. His heart raced with both excitement and fear. What if she had forgotten him? He wondered. What if another shepherd had taken his place? He tried to dismiss these thoughts, telling himself there were other girls in other villages. But deep down, he knew she mattered. As the sun rose, Santiago led his sheep eastward. Watching them, he reflected, they never worried about choices, only about food and water. In return, they gave him wool, companionship, and sometimes even their lives. They trusted him so completely that they no longer relied on their own instincts. It was a heavy thought. He pulled his jacket close against the morning chill, grateful for its warmth. Later, in the heat of the day, he would curse its weight, but for now, it served its purpose. Santiago reminded himself that everything in life has a purpose, even hardships. He also thought about the story he wanted to tell the merchant's daughter when he saw her again. He would explain how he had once been a student at a seminary, studying Latin, Spanish, and theology. His parents had dreamed of him becoming a priest, a source of pride for their poor farming family. But Santiago's heart had longed for something else, not the rituals of the church, but the vastness of the world. He remembered the day he told his father about this dream. At first, his father spoke of travelers who passed through their village, rich strangers who left unchanged, except with memories of castles and mountains. But Santiago insisted. He wanted to see the lands beyond, not just hear about them. Finally, his father gave him his blessing. He handed Santiago a small pouch containing 3 ancient gold coins saved from the fields. "Buy your flock," he said. "Be a shepherd. Travel if you must. Someday, you'll realize our land is the best, and our women the most beautiful." Santiago left that day with his sheep, carrying not only his father's blessing, but also the quiet knowledge that his father, too, had once dreamed of traveling, a dream buried beneath years of toil and responsibility. And so the boy continued his journey, a shepherd who carried not just wool and bread, but dreams of love, freedom, and treasure yet to be discovered. The horizon blushed red as dawn broke, and the boy watched the sun slowly climb over the Andalusian fields. Santiago, the shepherd with restless dreams, remembered his father's words. He felt grateful. After all, he had already seen castles, wandered through towns, and even met women in his travels. Yet none of them compared to the merchant's daughter who waited for him in Tarifa. His life was simple. A jacket to shield him, a book he could trade when he grew tired of it, and his flock of sheep. But most precious of all, freedom. Each day was his own. If he ever grew weary of shepherding, he could sell his flock, go to sea, and chase new horizons. As the sun warmed his face, Santiago thought, "I could never have found God locked inside a seminary." He liked taking new paths. Even on familiar routes, he'd wander just to see something different. To him, the world was vast, full of endless roads. Yet he often noticed that his sheep didn't care. They followed blindly, seeking only food and water. "Perhaps we are all like that," he mused. "Even me, I've thought of no woman but the merchant's daughter since the day I met her." He quickened his steps toward Tarifa. There, he would freshen up, trade his book, and prepare for his meeting with the girl. He didn't want to imagine that another shepherd, richer or with more sheep, might have already claimed her hand. A thought stirred inside him. It's the possibility of having a dream come true that makes life interesting. But then he remembered something else. Tarifa was home to an old woman who claimed she could read dreams. Curiosity led him to her small house. She guided him behind a curtain of colored beads, into a room simple and strange, a table, 2 chairs, and an image of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. She took his hands and whispered a prayer. Santiago grew uneasy. Memories of childhood fears returned, for he had often heard frightening tales of gypsies. Tricksters, kidnappers, even servants of the devil. His heart trembled, but he whispered in Our Father to steady himself. Finally, the woman spoke. "Dreams are the language of God. Sometimes he speaks clearly, sometimes only the dreamer can understand. Either way, I must be paid." Santiago nearly left, but then reminded himself, shepherds always take risks. With courage, he told her of his recurring dream, of a child who played with his sheep, then led him to the Egyptian pyramids, where treasure awaited. Each time, the dream ended just before the child revealed the exact location. The woman grew serious. "Swear to me," she demanded, "that if you find the treasure, you will give me 1/10. Reluctantly, he swore. Her interpretation was simple, perhaps too simple. "Go to the pyramids. There you will find treasure." Santiago left frustrated. He had hoped for more. Yet at least he had paid nothing. He laughed bitterly at himself for believing in such things. He returned to the town square, bought wine, exchanged his book, and rested on a bench. He liked meeting strangers in each new town. It kept life fresh. People he saw every day, like at the seminary, always wanted him to change. He thought, everyone knows how others should live, but no one knows how to live their own life. As he sat reading, an old man approached, trying to strike up a conversation. Santiago answered curtly, wishing to be left alone. But the man persisted. He asked for wine, asked about the book, and finally revealed something startling. It's a book that says what most books say, that people fail to choose their personal legends, and so they believe in the world's greatest lie. Curious, Santiago asked. And what is that lie? The man's eyes gleamed. It is this, that at a certain point in life, we lose control, and fate takes over. That's the lie? Santiago was startled. He admitted that when others wanted him to be a priest, he had chosen to be a shepherd instead. Because you love to travel, the old man replied knowingly. The boy was unsettled. This man seemed to read his thoughts. He introduced himself as Melchizedek, the king of Salem, a strange faraway place Santiago had never heard of. The boy almost laughed. A king, sitting alone in Tarifa? But the old man's words had weight. Then came the true surprise. Melchizedek offered him a bargain. Give me 1/10 of your flock, and I will show you the path to your treasure. Santiago's heart raced. How did this stranger know of his dream? Surely, he must be another trickster. But before he could leave, the old man scratched something in the sand. Santiago's eyes widened. There, written plainly, were the names of his parents, the seminary he once attended, and even the secret name of the merchant's daughter, something Santiago himself had never spoken aloud. In that moment, Santiago knew this was no ordinary man. His destiny, it seemed, was calling. The warehouse buzzed with noise as the caravan prepared for its long journey across the desert. Among the bustle sat the Englishman, clutching his books on alchemy, his heart restless with anticipation. For years he had searched for hidden knowledge, the philosopher's stone, the elixir of life, the secrets whispered through centuries, and now, destiny seemed to have drawn him here. He believed in omens, and meeting this young shepherd, Santiago, with the sacred stones Urim and Thummim in his hand, could hardly be a coincidence. Santiago, too, felt the stirrings of fate. He had doubted his decision many times since leaving his flock, but deep inside, he knew choices were only the beginning. Once a person commits, life carries them like a powerful current toward places they could never have imagined. Looking at the Englishman, Santiago realized he was not alone on this journey. Others, too, were searching. Not for sheep or survival, but for truth, for treasure, for the language of the universe itself. Their conversation deepened as the caravan master summoned them. The Englishman spoke of omens, of the universal language that connected all things, a language humanity once understood but had long forgotten. Santiago listened, fascinated. He confessed that he sought a treasure buried near the pyramids. At first he regretted revealing his secret, but the Englishman only nodded thoughtfully. In a way, he said, I am after a treasure too. But mine is not gold, it is knowledge. Soon, the two of them joined the caravan, a long train of camels and travelers winding its way into the golden sands. The desert stretched endlessly before them, vast and silent, hiding both danger and promise. During the long days, Santiago reflected on the crystal shop he had left behind, on the king who had once given him the stones, and on the dream that had set him on this path. At night, under the stars, he studied the Englishman's books, though much of their complicated symbols and formulas confused him. The Englishman, meanwhile, grew frustrated. He wanted to meet the alchemist, the mysterious figure said to live at the Al-Fayum oasis, the one who truly understood the master work. Yet the boy's innocent perspective sometimes startled him. Santiago looked at the world differently. While the Englishman searched in texts, Santiago searched in omens, in the flight of birds, in the whisper of the wind, in the beating of his own heart. And so, side by side, the shepherd and the scholar traveled deeper into the desert. They were different in many ways, one simple, one learned, but their destinies were now bound together by the same quest. Each believed that somewhere ahead, in the sands of Egypt, awaited the answer to their dreams. What they did not yet know was that the desert would test them, teach them, and ultimately reveal that the treasure each sought was far greater than gold or stone. At the highest point of Tarifa stood an old Moorish fort. From its weathered walls, one could glimpse the distant shores of Africa. There, Melchizedek, the king of Salem, sat quietly, the warm Levanter wind brushing against his face. The sheep he had just acquired fidgeted nearby, uneasy in the hands of a new master, yearning only for food and water. The old king's gaze followed a small ship cutting through the waves, leaving the port behind. He knew he would never see the boy again, just as he had once never seen Abraham again after receiving his 1/10 fee. That was the nature of his work. Still, though God should not harbor desires, Melchizedek found himself silently hoping the shepherd boy would succeed. He sighed, a small smile tugging at his lips. "It's a pity he'll forget my name so quickly," he thought. "I should have repeated it. Then perhaps, when he speaks of me, he would remember I was Melchizedek, the king of Salem." Looking to the heavens, he whispered with humility, "Forgive me, Lord. I know it is vanity, but even an old king longs to be remembered." Far across the sea, the boy was discovering a world unlike anything he had ever known. In the bustling streets of Tangier, he sat inside a small bar, watching men smoke from long, curling pipes that passed hand to hand. Around him, people prayed in strange ways, kneeling, pressing foreheads to the ground, and chanting from high towers. The boy shifted uneasily. These were the infidels he had once seen painted beneath the feet of Saint Santiago, the slayer of Moors. He felt alone, a stranger among strangers. And then it struck him, in his excitement, he had forgotten something vital. Here, no one spoke Spanish. Only Arabic filled the air. Panic gnawed at his chest, but hunger forced him to point toward a drink at another table. Bitter tea arrived, though his heart longed for wine. Still, his treasure awaited him, and with it, hope. He had sold his sheep, and the money jingling in his pouch gave him courage. Money carries its own kind of magic, he thought. As long as I have it, I am never truly alone. As he pondered his journey, a voice startled him. "Who are you?" asked a young man, in perfect Spanish. Relief washed over the boy. Here was someone he could understand. Dressed in Western clothes but clearly a local, the stranger was about the boy's age and build. The boy welcomed him, offering to buy a drink, wine, if possible. But the young man shook his head. "No wine here. The faith forbids it." Instead, the boy explained his quest, though he stopped short of mentioning the treasure. Trust was precious, and he remembered the king's warning not to promise what he didn't yet possess. The young man leaned closer. "To reach the pyramids, you must cross the Sahara. Do you have the money?" It was a strange question, but the boy trusted him. He revealed his coins. The bar owner scowled at the sight, muttering in Arabic, but the young man dismissed him. "Come. He doesn't want us here." Out on the streets, the boy felt safer. His new friend explained that Tangier, being a port city, was full of thieves. The boy nodded, grateful for the rescue. Together they wound through the crowded market where stalls overflowed with spices, carpets, and gleaming weapons. But then, the boy's eyes caught something extraordinary. A sword, unlike any he had seen, glittered with silver engravings and jewels. "How much is that sword?" he asked, turning back. But in the blink of an eye, his friend was gone. Panic surged. He scanned the plaza, desperate to spot him, but the man had vanished, taking with him every last coin. The weight of betrayal crushed the boy. That morning, he had been a shepherd in Andalusia, dreaming of a girl and her smile. By evening, he was alone in a foreign land, stripped of everything. Anguish welled in his chest, and for the first time in years, he wept openly. When I had my sheep, I was happy, he thought bitterly. Now I have nothing. Perhaps dreams are lies. Perhaps God is unfair. In his despair, he opened his pouch. No coins remained, only his jacket, the heavy book, and 2 smooth stones, Urim and Thummim, gifts from the old king. He held them gently, and their touch soothed him. They were proof. Proof that he had indeed met a king. Proof that this journey was real. He decided to test them. Pulling out a stone, he asked silently, "Is the old man still with me?" The stone answered yes. Encouraged, he asked again, "Will I find my treasure?" But as he reached inside, both stones slipped through a small hole in the pouch and clattered onto the ground. At first, he stooped to pick them up, then froze. An omen, he realized, recalling the king's words. Smiling faintly, he left the pouch as it was. Let the stones fall if they wished. He would not rely on them too much. He had promised to make his own decisions. As the empty market stretched before him, he wiped his tears. This was no longer a strange place. It was simply a new one. He had traveled farther than any shepherd he had ever known. And though betrayed, though penniless, he was not defeated. The boy straightened his shoulders, whispering to himself, "I am not a victim. I am an adventurer. And I am searching for treasure." As the caravan pressed deeper into the desert, Santiago found himself fascinated by the Englishman's books. But to him, they seemed strange and confusing, filled with symbols, odd references to Mercury, salt, dragons, and kings. Still, one simple truth kept echoing through those pages: all things are the manifestation of one thing. The Englishman proudly explained that this truth was written long ago on the famous emerald tablet. Santiago, puzzled, asked why such a simple truth needed endless books. The Englishman insisted that the books helped seekers understand those lines, though his own doubt was clear in his voice. Among all the heavy texts, one book caught Santiago's heart. It told stories of legendary alchemists, men who had spent their lives purifying metals. They believed that as metal was refined, it shed what was unnecessary until only its purest essence remained. This essence was called the soul of the world, the hidden language that connected all things. Their discovery was known as the masterwork, part liquid and part solid, the elixir of life, which healed all sickness and gave longevity, and the philosopher's stone, which could transform ordinary metals into gold. The Englishman spoke passionately of this path, of years spent watching flames and seeking truth. But Santiago, with his habit of simplifying, wondered if one couldn't simply learn from omens and life itself. This irritated the Englishman, who clung to tradition and formulas. Yet Santiago felt something different. Perhaps alchemy was not only in books or furnaces, but also in the quiet lessons of everyday life. As they talked, Santiago learned how a tiny fragment of the philosopher's stone could turn huge amounts of metal into gold. The idea filled him with wonder. He read about famous seekers who had achieved this: Helvetius, Elias, Fulcanelli, and Geber. They traveled the world, performed miracles, and followed their personal legends to the end. But when Santiago tried to uncover how the masterwork was actually achieved, the books only confused him, full of codes, drawings, and riddles. Frustrated, he asked why the texts were so complicated. The Englishman explained that such secrets could only be understood by those persistent enough to search deeply. If gold could be made easily, it would lose its value. Only those willing to dedicate their lives could uncover such truths. Santiago wasn't fully convinced. To him, the world's language seemed much simpler. Eventually, Santiago returned the books. The Englishman eagerly asked what he had learned. Santiago replied, "I learned that the world has a soul, that whoever understands it can speak the language of all things. I learned that many alchemists achieved their personal legends and found the philosopher's stone and elixir of life. But above all, I learned that it's all so simple it could be written on a single emerald." The Englishman was disappointed, believing Santiago's soul too primitive for real alchemy. He packed away his books, telling the boy to return to watching the caravan. Santiago did so quietly, reminding himself that everyone has their own way of learning, and both paths deserved respect. Days passed. The war between desert tribes grew closer. The caravan marched day and night, moving silently across the sands. Fear spread. Every sound seemed dangerous, even the groan of a camel. Yet the camel driver, Santiago's friend, remained calm. He explained his secret: live in the present. When I eat, I focus on eating. When I walk, I focus on walking. If I must die tomorrow, then tomorrow will be a good day to die. Happiness comes when we live fully in the moment. These words struck deep in Santiago's heart. He realized that even in the silence of the desert, there was life, stars, and meaning. And then, at last, after endless nights, the boy saw it. The horizon filled with the green of date palms. They had reached the oasis. For the weary caravan, it meant water, shade, and safety from war. For Santiago, it was a reminder of the camel driver's wisdom. Yesterday's danger could become today's miracle. Far away, another figure was watching, the alchemist. He saw the caravan arrive, but he paid little attention to the dust and noise. He knew by the omens that someone in this group was destined to be his student. He didn't yet know who it was, but he trusted that when the time came, the desert would reveal the answer. Because in truth, the language of the world cannot be trapped in books or symbols. It must be lived, spoken through life itself. Santiago could hardly believe his eyes. The oasis wasn't just a small patch of green with a single well, as he had once seen in a schoolbook. Before him stretched a world of life in the middle of the desert. Hundreds of wells, endless rows of date palms, and colorful tents scattered like jewels upon the sand. It was bigger than many of the towns he had known back in Spain. The Englishman, restless with excitement, whispered, "It looks like 1,001 nights." Children crowded around the travelers, curious about their camels and goods. Women rushed to see the cloth and treasures the merchants carried, and men asked eagerly about rumors of war. The silence of the desert seemed a distant memory. Laughter, shouting, and chatter filled the air. The caravan, after weeks of stillness, felt alive again. The camel driver explained to Santiago that oases were sacred, neutral ground. Tribes never fought there, for most who lived in the oasis were women and children. That night, the caravan leader gathered everyone together. They would remain until the tribal wars ended. As a sign of trust, all weapons had to be surrendered, for no army could be sheltered in an oasis. To Santiago's surprise, the Englishman handed over a shiny revolver. "It helped me trust people," he explained. But Santiago's thoughts were elsewhere. The closer he came to his treasure, the more difficult things became. He remembered what the old king had said about beginner's luck. That luck had carried him so far, but now, every step seemed a test of his patience and courage. He reminded himself not to rush. God had placed omens along his path, he realized. And for the first time, he understood those signs as part of God's language, guiding him gently toward his destiny. That night, exhausted, the boy was placed in a tent with other young men of the desert. They eagerly asked about the great cities, and Santiago shared stories from his life as a shepherd and his days in the crystal shop. Suddenly, the Englishman appeared. "I need you," he said, pulling Santiago outside. "Help me find the alchemist." They searched the sprawling oasis, convinced such a man would live differently from others. Perhaps his tent would be marked by a constant fire. But the oasis was too vast. Tired, they sat by a well. Santiago suggested asking someone. Though reluctant, the Englishman agreed, since Santiago spoke Arabic better. Their first attempts failed. A woman, hurriedly drawing water, told Santiago never to speak to women dressed in black, for they were married. Men they asked turned suspicious, one even quoting verses from the Quran before walking away. Finally, an old man admitted that if such a healer lived there, he was powerful indeed, so powerful that even the tribal chiefs could only see him if he wished it. Disappointed yet hopeful, they pressed on. Then Santiago saw her. A young woman, her head covered but her face revealed. As she approached the well, carrying her jar, time seemed to stop. When Santiago looked into her dark eyes, the soul of the world stirred inside him. In her presence, he understood a language older than words, a language everyone on earth knew but few remembered. It was love. Pure, undeniable, eternal. In that instant, Santiago knew she was the one his heart had been searching for. She smiled, and it was the greatest omen of his life. He thought of his parents' words, that love came only after years of knowing someone. But this was different. This was the language of the world itself, where past and future faded away, and only the present mattered. The girl's name was Fatima. To Santiago, it was already written, Maktub. He had loved her before he had even known she existed. Later, Fatima revealed that the man who healed people lived in the south of the oasis. The Englishman, thrilled, hurried away to find him. Santiago remained by the well, his heart filled with the certainty that his journey had given him something greater than treasure. The next day, Santiago returned, waiting for Fatima. He saw the Englishman first, who told him the alchemist's only advice had been, "Go and try." It was a lesson Santiago understood better than his friend. The Englishman had to learn by doing, not by searching in books. Then Fatima appeared. Gathering his courage, Santiago confessed, "I love you. I want you to be my wife." She dropped her water jar, startled by his words. But Santiago pressed on, telling her that crossing the desert had seemed like a curse, yet now it was a blessing, for it had brought him to her. Fatima listened quietly, then reminded him, the war would end one day. Santiago thought of the palm trees, the endless desert, and his sheep back in Spain. Treasure or no treasure, he realized that his heart had found a home. For Santiago, Fatima was more precious than all the gold in the world. Every day, Santiago returned to the well, where Fatima came to draw water. Those brief moments, 15 minutes at most, were the brightest part of his day. He told her about his life as a shepherd among the hills of Andalusia, about the crystal shop where he had worked, about the king who once appeared before him, and about his dream of treasure. Fatima listened with quiet grace, and their friendship deepened into love. Nearly a month passed in the oasis when the leader of the caravan summoned everyone. His words carried the weight of the desert. "We do not know when the war will end," he said. "It may last for years. Both armies are powerful, and Allah is on both sides. This is not a battle of good against evil, it is a struggle for power, and such wars have no end." The travelers went back to their tents, resigned. Santiago hurried to the well to meet Fatima, sharing the grim news. But her reply was steady, her eyes shining with faith. "The day after we met, you told me you loved me," she reminded him softly. "You taught me about the soul of the world. Now I am part of you. I have dreamed since childhood that the desert would bring me a gift. That gift is you." Santiago's heart trembled with longing, yet Fatima's strength surpassed his own. "Follow your dream," she urged. "If you must wait until the war ends, wait. If you must leave before, then go. The dunes change with the wind, but the desert never changes. Our love will be the same. If I am part of your destiny, you will return." She whispered one word, a word heavy with meaning. Maktub, it is written. Santiago left with sadness, thinking of the shepherds he had once known. Marriage had always tied them to the fields and to home. Love, he thought, required staying. But Fatima's answer was different. When he spoke of this, she only smiled. The desert takes our men, and not all return. Some become part of the clouds, the animals, the water of the earth. They become the soul of the world itself. I am a woman of the desert, Santiago. I am proud of that. I will wait, no matter what. And if you never return, I will still love you as part of the desert's soul. Her words both broke and strengthened him. He carried them as he wandered the oasis and finally came upon the Englishman. To his surprise, the Englishman had built a furnace, with a flask heating above its flames. His eyes glowed with determination. This is only the first step, he explained. I must separate the sulfur. I was too afraid of failure before, but now I begin, even if it is late. For the first time, Santiago saw not a man lost in books but a man taking action. Later, Santiago drifted beyond the palms into the open desert. The sand, the silence, the shells scattered in the dust whispered secrets of an ancient sea. He sat upon a stone, trying to untangle love from possession, wondering whether love could truly mean freedom. Above him, two hawks circled in the fading light. Their flight seemed random, yet meaningful, another message written in the language of the world. He felt sleepy, drifting between thought and dream. Suddenly, one hawk dove, striking the other. In that flash of movement, Santiago saw a vision, an army, swords flashing, charging into the oasis. The image vanished, but it left his heart trembling. He wanted to dismiss it as a mirage. But the old king's words echoed in him. Always heed the omens. This was not fantasy, it was a warning. As the sun dipped, Santiago hurried back toward the oasis. He found the camel driver sitting beneath a palm. Breathless, he told him, "An army is coming. I had a vision." The camel driver looked at him calmly. "The desert fills men with visions," he said. But when Santiago described the hawks and how he felt his heart sink into the soul of the world, the man's expression grew serious. He told Santiago that the world always reveals its truth in simple things: a flight of birds, a card, a palm, or a cast of twigs. These were not signs of the future in themselves, but openings, glimpses into the language of God. The camel driver explained how he had once gone to seers, who guessed at futures by throwing twigs. The wisest seer had told him, "The secret lies in the present. Improve the present, and the future will be brighter." God rarely reveals the future, only when it must be changed. Now the camel driver looked Santiago in the eyes. "God has shown you a future that must be altered. You must tell the tribal chiefs." Fear stirred in Santiago. "They will laugh at me. They are men of the desert," the camel driver replied. "They understand omens. If Allah wishes, He chooses someone to deliver the warning. And this time, He has chosen you." Santiago thought of Fatima, and with courage rising in him, he resolved to go before the chiefs. The fate of the oasis might rest on what he had seen in the flight of hawks. Santiago walked toward the great white tent that stood at the heart of the oasis. Guards stood outside, their faces stern, but the boy's resolve was firm. "I have seen an omen," he told them. "I must speak to the tribal leaders." The guard vanished into the tent, and after some time returned with a young Arab in white and gold. Santiago described what he had witnessed in the sky, the flight of the hawks and the vision of an approaching army. The young man listened without expression, then disappeared back inside. The boy was told to wait. The hours dragged on. The sun set, campfires around the oasis flickered out one by one, and the air grew cool under the desert moon. Merchants and warriors entered and exited the tent, their voices hushed and serious. Santiago thought of Fatima as he waited, puzzled by her words about love and destiny. At last, the guard beckoned him inside. What he found stunned him. The floor was covered with richly woven carpets. Golden lamps hung from above, casting warm light over the room. Around the back of the tent sat 8 tribal chiefs, arranged in a semicircle on silk cushions. Servants moved quietly, pouring tea, tending hookahs, and carrying trays of spices. The boy instantly noticed the central figure, an elder draped in white and gold, radiating authority. "Who is this stranger who dares speak of omens?" one of the chiefs demanded. "It is I," Santiago answered, and he told them what he had seen. The chiefs murmured among themselves. One asked, "Why would the desert reveal secrets to a newcomer, when we have lived here all our lives?" "Perhaps," Santiago replied, "because my eyes are still fresh. I see what others, too used to the desert, might overlook." The discussion grew tense. Some argued that the oasis was sacred ground, a place of peace where no battle could ever reach. Others questioned whether a boy's vision could be trusted at all. Santiago's heart faltered. He regretted speaking up. But then his gaze met the elder at the center. The man had remained silent, yet Santiago felt calm radiating from him, as if the desert itself listened through him. Finally, the elder spoke. He told the story of a youth long ago, sold as a slave in a distant land, who had risen to interpret a pharaoh's dream of famine. That young man, Joseph, had saved Egypt, because he believed in the truth of dreams. "Tradition guides us," the elder said. "Tradition tells us that the desert must be trusted, even when the message comes from unlikely lips." Then the verdict came. "Tomorrow," said the elder, "the men of the oasis will break the custom of peace. They will carry weapons, watching from sunrise to sunset. If enemies come, we will be ready. For every 10 foes slain, you will earn a piece of gold." His eyes grew cold. "But if no battle comes, then your life will pay for this omen. Weapons must not be drawn in vain." The boy left the tent under the full moon, his heart heavy. He had touched the soul of the world, and now the price might be his death. Yet he felt no regret. If tomorrow was to be his last day, then at least he had lived fully. He had crossed the sea, worked among crystals, wandered the desert, loved Fatima. Whatever happened was written. Maktub. But destiny had one more test. A sudden roar filled the night, and the earth shook as a white horse charged from the dust, towering over him. Its rider was cloaked entirely in black, only his eyes visible above the veil. On his shoulder perched a falcon, and in his hand gleamed a curved blade that caught the moonlight. "Who dares read the flight of hawks?" the horseman thundered. "It was I," Santiago said, standing firm, though fear coursed through him. The rider pressed the blade's tip to his forehead, drawing a bead of blood. Yet the boy did not flinch. He thought of Fatima, of his journey, of the omens that had guided him. If death awaited him, he would face it with dignity. But the strike never came. The rider lowered his sword, testing the boy's courage with silence. "Why did you read the birds?" he demanded. "To save the oasis," Santiago answered. "The hawks showed me what was written." The rider studied him, then slowly sheathed his blade. "Courage," he said, "is the first requirement for understanding the language of the world. The desert teaches hard lessons, it gives, but it also destroys those who trust it too blindly." The boy's heart raced. This man spoke like one who understood truths few men dared to grasp. The rider turned his horse. "If your vision proves true, and you survive tomorrow, seek me in the desert. You will find me to the south." With a crack of his whip, he vanished into the night, leaving only swirling sand behind. Santiago stood trembling but alive. He had just met the one he had been unconsciously seeking, the alchemist. The morning after Santiago's warning, the oasis at Al-Fayum was transformed. Hidden among the palm trees, 2,000 armed men waited silently. By midday, dust rose on the horizon. 500 tribesmen approached on horseback. They entered quietly, pretending peace, but the swords and rifles hidden beneath their robes told another story. When they reached the great white tent at the center of the oasis, the weapons flashed in the sunlight. But instead of victory, they found only emptiness. The men of the oasis surged forward, surrounding them from all sides. The battle was fierce but short. In less than half an hour, nearly every invader lay on the ground. Only one, their commander, was spared, dragged before the chieftains to explain why he had broken the sacred law of neutrality. His excuse was desperation, hunger, thirst, and exhaustion from endless war. Yet tradition was clear. The oasis was a sanctuary, and violating it meant death. The commander was hanged from a lifeless palm tree, left to twist in the desert wind. For Santiago, the outcome was both terrifying and affirming. His vision of hawks battling in the sky had been real, a message from the desert itself. The tribal elders rewarded him with 50 pieces of gold and asked him to serve as counselor of the oasis. Santiago had begun as a shepherd with nothing but dreams, and now, strangers recognized his wisdom. But that night, when the stars appeared, his steps carried him south, toward the mysterious horseman he had met beneath the full moon. There, at a lonely tent, Santiago finally stood face to face with the alchemist. The man was nothing like Santiago had expected. No laboratory of bubbling flasks, no piles of gold or jewels, just carpets, books, and a small fire. He roasted 2 hawks for their meal and poured Santiago a cup of deep red wine. His presence was both unsettling and comforting, his words sharp but filled with truth. "The omens told me you would come," the alchemist said. "And they told me you would need help." At first, Santiago protested. He already had wealth, his camel, his gold, the fortune earned from the crystal shop. And he had Fatima, the desert woman whose love felt like treasure itself. Why risk his life again? Why cross the desert in the midst of war? But the alchemist shook his head. "Your journey is not finished. You must follow it to the pyramids. Only there will you find the treasure that the universe has reserved for you." Santiago fell silent. Deep down, he knew the man was right. The next night, Santiago returned with a horse, just as instructed. Together, he and the alchemist rode into the vast desert, silver moonlight guiding their path. The alchemist asked Santiago to show him where there was life in the barren sands. At first, the boy hesitated. How could he know? But then he loosened the reins, trusting his horse. The animal ran freely until it suddenly slowed. There, beneath the stones, was a hidden life, a deadly cobra. With calm precision, the alchemist captured the serpent, drew a circle in the sand, and placed it inside. At once, the creature lay still. "This is the omen I needed," the alchemist said. "Life exists even here. And where there is life, treasure can be found." Yet Santiago's heart was heavy. He thought of Fatima, the woman who had promised to wait for him. Could he really leave her behind? The alchemist answered his unspoken fear. "True love never keeps a man from his destiny. If it does, then it is not true love. Fatima is a woman of the desert. She knows men must go away, and she knows they return." Then the alchemist warned Santiago of another path, the life he would live if he chose to stay. He would be happy for a while, married to Fatima, respected as counselor, wealthy with camels and gold. But slowly, regret would creep in. The omens would whisper of his treasure, and Santiago would ignore them. Eventually, the whispers would fade altogether. He would grow old, knowing he had abandoned his dream. The words struck Santiago's heart like a blade of truth. In that moment, he realized the cost of turning away from his personal legend. Love, he now understood, was not an obstacle but a force urging him forward. As they returned to the oasis, Santiago listened for Fatima's voice in the wind. Though he could not hear her, he felt peace. His decision was clear. "I will go with you," he told the alchemist. And the desert seemed to sigh in agreement. At dawn, they would leave together. Toward danger, toward destiny, and toward the treasure that awaited beneath the shadow of the pyramids. The night before leaving, Santiago could not rest. His thoughts circled endlessly around Fatima, around the treasure, and around the path he was about to walk. Just before dawn, unable to hold back any longer, he woke one of the boys sleeping nearby and asked to be guided to Fatima's tent. He gave the boy enough gold for a sheep, then sent him inside to wake Fatima gently. The boy returned quickly, richer still, for Santiago had given him enough for yet another sheep. Now alone, Santiago waited in the cool, quiet night. Fatima stepped softly from the tent, her presence like moonlight among the palms. Together, they walked where no one could see them. Tradition forbade such meetings, but Santiago no longer cared for rules. His heart was stronger than fear. "I must go," he whispered. "But I will return. I love you because—" She silenced him. "No reason is needed for love. One is loved because one is loved." Still, Santiago poured out his heart. The dream, the king, the crystal shop, the desert, the war, the alchemist, all the signs that had led him to her. To him, it felt as if the universe itself had conspired to bring them together. Their embrace was tender, hesitant yet eternal. For the first time, they touched as lovers. Santiago promised to return as Fatima's father had always returned to her mother. Tears welled in her eyes, but she looked away. "I am a woman of the desert," she said. "But above all, I am a woman." The next morning, Santiago was gone. For Fatima, everything in the oasis had changed. No longer a haven of palms and wells, it was now only a place of waiting. Her eyes turned to the desert each day, following the winds, hoping that they carried her love to Santiago. Meanwhile, Santiago rode beside the alchemist into the vast sands. The master reminded him, "Do not cling to what you leave behind. If it is true, it will remain forever in the soul of the world." Santiago's heart wrestled with images of Fatima. Yet he rode on, trusting that what was pure would not fade. The days stretched into silence. The alchemist rode ahead with a falcon perched on his shoulder. Each evening, the bird brought back food, a rabbit one day, birds the next. They hid their fires, for war still raged across the desert, and sometimes the wind itself carried the heavy stench of blood. After a week, the alchemist halted early. He handed Santiago water and spoke solemnly. "You are nearing the end of your journey. I congratulate you. You have pursued your personal legend." Santiago, still restless, protested. "And yet you have taught me nothing along the way." The alchemist smiled faintly. "There is only one way to learn, through action. All you need has already been taught to you. Only one lesson remains." That night, as they cooked in the sand's concealment, Santiago pressed further. "Why are you called the alchemist? Why did so many fail in their quest for gold?" "They sought only gold," the master said. "But true alchemy is living one's destiny, not chasing riches." Then, with swift movements, he drew a simple figure in the sand. "This," he said, "is the Emerald Tablet. The world reduced to a single truth." Santiago squinted at the strange symbols, disappointed. But the alchemist's voice cut through his doubts. "It cannot be understood by reason alone. It is like the flight of hawks, an omen, a language beyond words. The visible world is but a reflection of the divine. A grain of sand holds the marvel of creation. To learn, Santiago, you must listen not with your eyes, but with your heart." And under the cold desert stars, the boy realized, his heart was becoming his true guide. For 2 long days, Santiago and the alchemist crossed the desert in silence. The closer they came to the heart of the war-torn land, the more cautious the alchemist became. The boy, meanwhile, struggled with the restless voice of his heart. Sometimes it spoke of fear, whispering stories of men who had died in search of their treasure. Other times it beat fast with hope, reminding him of Fatima, of love, of the pyramids shimmering ahead. His heart was never still. It cried, it dreamed, it doubted. One evening, Santiago finally asked, "Why must I listen to my heart, when it confuses me so much?" The alchemist replied calmly, "Because where your heart is, there lies your treasure. Even when it trembles, even when it suffers, it speaks the truth of your soul." The boy argued that his heart was a traitor, filled with fear, longing, and weakness. But the master only smiled. "That means it is alive. A heart that feels is better than one that stays silent. Learn its ways, know its dreams, and it will never betray you with surprise. You cannot escape your heart. Better to listen and to understand." So the boy began to pay attention. Slowly he discovered his heart's tricks, its fears, its doubts, its moments of joy. He realized that fear of suffering was worse than suffering itself. And as he embraced this, his heart softened. For a whole afternoon it grew quiet content. Then it spoke again, of God, of eternity, of how every grain of sand carried the miracle of creation. It confessed that most people never pursue their dreams, because they are afraid. And when dreams are abandoned, hearts grow silent, whispering only faintly, hoping not to bring more pain. But Santiago made a promise. "Speak to me always. If I stray, warn me. I will listen." The alchemist, hearing this vow, knew the boy's heart had finally rejoined the soul of the world. "Good," he said. "Now continue toward the pyramids. But remember, before a dream is fulfilled, the soul of the world will test everything you have learned. That is when most give up. It is the darkest hour before the dawn." The test soon came. 3 armed men stopped them in the desert, demanding to search their bags. They found Santiago's coins, then pulled out a crystal flask and a strange yellow stone from the alchemist's pouch. "What is this?" they sneered. "The elixir of life and the philosopher's stone." The alchemist replied without hesitation. "The secrets of alchemy. With this, one never falls ill, and any metal can become gold." The tribesmen burst out laughing, taking it for a joke. They returned the items and let them pass. Santiago was stunned. "Why did you tell them that?" The alchemist answered, "To teach you this. When you carry treasures within, few will believe you. That is one of life's simplest lessons." They continued on. Day by day, Santiago grew more at peace with his heart. The boy realized it had always guided him, away from thieves, away from danger, toward the omens. And though the desert was harsh, his heart became his ally, reminding him of his courage, his sacrifices, his dreams. Finally, as they crossed a mountain range, the alchemist told him, "We are only 2 days from the pyramids." Santiago asked eagerly, "Then teach me the secret of turning lead into gold." The alchemist explained that everything in the universe evolves toward perfection. Gold was simply the highest form of metal, a symbol of ultimate growth. "True alchemists," he said, "seek transformation of the soul, not riches. Those who chase only gold never find it, because they interfere with the destinies of other things." To prove his point, he handed Santiago a seashell. "This desert was once a sea. Listen." Holding it to his ear, the boy heard the faint echo of waves. "See? The sea lives on in the shell. That is its personal legend. And it will remain so until one day the desert is covered again by water." As the sun set, Santiago's heart suddenly pounded with warning. He glanced at the alchemist, but the master showed no concern. Minutes later, shadows appeared on the dunes. 2 riders became 10. 10 became 100. Soon they were surrounded. The tribesmen wore indigo robes and veils that covered their faces, their dark eyes the only part revealed. Eyes that were cold. eyes that carried the weight of death. The boy realized this was the test the alchemist had spoken of. The soldiers dragged Santiago and the alchemist to a large tent where the tribal chief sat with his men. The air was thick with suspicion. "These two are spies," one of the soldiers declared. The alchemist stepped forward, calm and unshaken. "We are nothing more than travelers of the desert," he said. But the men accused them of speaking with enemy troops days earlier. "I am simply a wanderer who knows the stars," the alchemist replied. "I guided this boy here, nothing more." The chief's gaze sharpened. "And who is this boy?" The alchemist answered boldly. "He is an alchemist, one who understands the forces of nature. He has powers you cannot imagine." Santiago froze in disbelief. Him? An alchemist? He barely understood the desert, let alone the forces of nature. The chief narrowed his eyes. "And what powers does he claim?" "He could destroy this camp using nothing but the wind," the alchemist declared. The tent erupted in laughter. Men of war did not fear storms or sand. They had seen them all before. Yet in their hearts, a small unease stirred. Sorcerers, after all, were not to be taken lightly. "Then I want to see him do it," the chief said. "He will," the alchemist replied calmly. "But he needs 3 days. If he fails, both our lives are yours." The chief smirked. "You offer me what already belongs to me. But 3 days you shall have." Santiago's heart nearly stopped as they were shoved from the tent. His savings, his gold, even his sheep, all had been given to the chief as payment for their lives. "You've given away everything I had," he cried. "And in doing so," the alchemist said, "I bought you 3 more days of life. That is worth more than gold." But Santiago trembled. How could he possibly turn into the wind? He wasn't an alchemist. He wasn't anything. That night, the master poured tea over Santiago's wrists, calming him. "Don't surrender to fear," he said gently. "Fear is the only thing that silences the heart. Remember, the only thing that makes a dream impossible is the fear of failure." Still, the boy lay awake, haunted by dread. The first day passed with battles raging nearby. Wounded men staggered into camp, some never to rise again. Santiago stared at them, realizing death was always near, whether one faced it today or tomorrow. At day's end, he told the alchemist again, "I don't know how to become the wind." The master, feeding his falcon, only replied, "I already know how. You are the one who must learn." On the second day, Santiago climbed a cliff overlooking the endless desert. He listened to his heart, which beat fast with fear. Yet, as he listened, he heard another voice, the desert itself. The sands, the dunes, the stubborn plants, all seemed to speak with him. He realized they shared the same language, the language of existence. By the third day, the camp buzzed with expectation. The chief summoned the alchemist. "Let us see your boy who turns into the wind." Santiago led them to the cliff where he had waited the day before. The tribesman sat in silence as he closed his eyes, facing the horizon. He spoke to the desert first. "Somewhere within your sands, the woman I love is waiting for me. Help me to reach her. Help me to become the wind." The desert listened but said it could not grant such a request alone. "You must ask the wind," it whispered. Soon, a breeze rose, brushing Santiago's face. The wind had heard. "Why ask this of me?" it whispered. "I carry the voices of the world, but I cannot turn a man into the wind." "You can't," Santiago said with conviction. "Because I, too, am part of creation. I have inside me the desert, the seas, the stars, everything. We are all made by the same hand, and we share the same soul." The wind grew restless. No man had ever spoken to it like this before. Curious, it whirled stronger, raising sand into the air. But it admitted, "I do not understand love." And without love I cannot help you. Then carry me higher, Santiago urged. Lift the sands until the sky itself disappears, so I may speak with heaven. The wind roared to life, howling across the dunes, sweeping tents and weapons in its fury. The desert became a storm of gold. Horses cried out, soldiers shielded their eyes, and fears spread through the camp. The tribesmen whispered that the boy might truly be a sorcerer. Through the storm, Santiago lifted his arms to the heavens. He had spoken with the desert, he had spoken with the wind. Now only one voice remained, the very soul of the world. As the boy and the alchemist mounted their horses, the desert stretched endlessly before them. The pyramids were now only hours away, yet Santiago felt both excitement and a quiet fear in his heart. Every step of his journey had tested him, shaping him into someone new, someone who now understood the language of the world. The alchemist rode beside him in silence, as if sensing that the boy needed these final hours to reflect. The lessons were now his to carry. Santiago realized that true wisdom doesn't come from being taught, but from experiencing, suffering, and daring to follow one's personal legend. By dusk, they parted ways. The alchemist turned back toward the desert, carrying with him his share of the gold, while Santiago pressed onward toward the towering pyramids. Alone now, he felt the weight of destiny on his shoulders. Finally, after a long trek, he saw them, rising tall and eternal against the fading sky. The sight overwhelmed him. Tears filled his eyes, not from sadness, but from the awe of seeing the very place that had haunted his dreams again and again. He fell to his knees in the sand, whispering a prayer of gratitude. But just as he began to dig at the base of the pyramids, believing his treasure lay beneath the ancient stones, a group of armed refugees appeared. They mocked him, beat him, and demanded to know what he was doing. Broken and bruised, Santiago told them about his dream of finding treasure here. The men laughed bitterly. One of them sneered, "You fool! I once had a dream too. A dream that treasure was buried under a tree at a ruined church in Spain. But I was not stupid enough to cross deserts for it." With that, they left him bleeding in the sand. In that moment of pain, Santiago suddenly understood. The treasure had never been buried here. The dream had guided him in a circle, only to teach him that what he sought was back where his journey began. In the ruined church where he once tended his sheep. Though battered, he laughed through his tears. The desert, the omens, the alchemists, all had been preparing him, not for gold, but for the true treasure of self-discovery. Yet now he also knew where the real, physical treasure awaited. With new strength, Santiago began his journey home. When he reached the old church in Spain, the sycamore tree stood tall, its roots stretching deep into the earth. Digging beneath it, Santiago's hands trembled as they touched a chest. Inside, glittering before him, was gold, jewels, and precious stones, more wealth than he had ever imagined. But as he gazed at it, Santiago smiled. Yes, he had found the treasure. Yet the greatest treasure of all was not in the chest, it was in the wisdom he had gained, the love he had discovered, and the courage to follow his dream. And with that, Santiago's journey had come full circle. The boy who once was just a shepherd had now become a man who understood the soul of the world. Bruised and trembling, Santiago stood weakly in the shadow of the great pyramids. The desert wind whipped around him, carrying away the voices of the men who had mocked and beaten him. Yet, instead of despair, laughter rose from deep within his chest. The universe had just revealed its greatest secret. His treasure was not here, but back home, at the ruined church in Spain, beneath the sycamore tree where his journey had begun. All along, the omens had led him not only across deserts and wars, but also into himself. The treasure had been waiting where his story started, but without the journey, he never would have been ready to understand it. With renewed strength, Santiago set off. His steps were lighter now, his heart overflowing with gratitude. The desert had stripped him of everything, his sheep, his savings, his comforts, yet given him everything in return: wisdom, love, and faith. Weeks later, he reached Spain once more. The landscape was familiar, yet he was not the same shepherd boy who had once wandered these hills. He retraced his steps to the old, ruined church. The sycamore tree stretched tall above the crumbling walls, just as before. Santiago's heart pounded with anticipation. Kneeling at the roots of the tree, he began to dig. The earth was hard at first, but he pressed on, his hands blistered and sore. At last, his fingers struck something solid. With trembling hands, he unearthed an old wooden chest. His breath caught in his throat as he pried it open. Inside, gold coins shimmered in the dim light. Jewels sparkled, and ancient treasures glowed with timeless beauty. It was more wealth than he could have ever dreamed of. His eyes filled with tears, not only because of the fortune before him, but because of the meaning behind it. The treasure was real, yes, but the true gift was the journey itself. The omens, the lessons, the love of Fatima, the wisdom of the alchemist. All of it had shaped him into who he was now. He understood that his personal legend was never just about gold, but about learning to listen to his heart and to the soul of the world. As Santiago gazed at the treasure, the desert wind whispered through the ruined church. He smiled, for he recognized it. It was the Levanter, the same wind that had carried him across the seas from Spain to Africa, the same wind that had witnessed his transformation. The wind seemed to laugh and embrace him, carrying with it the voice of Fatima, waiting for him in the desert. Santiago closed his eyes, feeling the unity of it all. At last, his heart was at peace. The boy who had once been a simple shepherd had found his treasure, his destiny, and most importantly, himself. And that brings us to the end of The Alchemist, a story of dreams, destiny, and the courage to follow one's heart. Santiago's journey reminds us that sometimes, the greatest treasures are not just found in gold or jewels, but in the wisdom and transformation we gain along the way. If you enjoyed this storytelling summary and felt inspired by Santiago's adventure, make sure to like this video, share it with friends, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next stories we bring to life. Your support helps us keep creating more inspiring content. And remember, just like Santiago, you too have your own personal legend waiting to be discovered. Never stop following your dreams. Thank you for watching, and until next time, keep chasing your treasure.